On behalf of the Latin America Working Group, Washington Office on Latin America and Peace Brigades International, I want to welcome you all tonight to our event, Defending the Defenders in Mexico. So we are incredibly excited to have this evening two defenders from organizations from northern Mexico, as well as Ben Leather from PBI Mexico. Alberto Chico Pizarro, who works with the migrant shelter in Saltillo, Coahuila, around an hour from the city of Monterrey in northern Mexico, and Silvia Grijalva, who works at the Human Rights Center, Paso del Norte in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez. And we've had the pleasure of accompanying them for a series of meetings and events here in Washington, D.C. For the past 3 days, so I'm excited that you guys had the opportunity to hear from them as well about their work, as well as, and Ben will share more about this as well, the situation for the very grave security situation that many human rights defenders are experiencing throughout Mexico. To that end, I would like to encourage everyone to, at some point during the evening, there is an action alert. We have a computer and an iPad over here where you can send a message to your member of Congress encouraging them to sign on to a Dear Colleague letter urging Secretary Kerry to make sure that human rights issues are on the table in the bilateral dialogue with Mexico. Something that's super important because we may know that President Obama is going to be doing his first visit to meet with the Peña Nieto administration in Mexico in early May. So this is super timely. I invite you also, there's an opportunity to sign up for our various listservs where you can get more information about these issues. In terms of what's going to be going on tonight, we're going to be having presentations from the various panelists and a short film. There will also be an opportunity for questions and answers and discussion. And then we will move on to have some music from Cosita Seria. So at the end of that, this will be lovely. So stick around. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. And I will now pass the microphone to Catherine from PBI.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Catherine Hughes-Freytek. I'm the director of Peace Brigades International in the US. We are an international organization. Our main headquarters is in London, but we have been around about 31 years now. And our main focus is to protect and defend human rights and human rights defenders. We are happiest and focused really on our field volunteers that are in the field in countries of conflict. We've worked all over the years at various times. We have a really strong Latin American focus right now. So we have a program in Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, and we're going to be moving into Honduras coming over the next year. So we're excited about that. There have been a lot of requests. We're also right now in Nepal. We're moving back into Indonesia, and we've actually got a team on the ground in Kenya, which will be our first stint into Africa coming up. So we're very global in that way. We are a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, and we focus on being locally led. So we're very strong on the people on the ground, working in the field, the human rights defenders and activists. Could be women human rights defenders, environmentalists, labor union workers, journalists, lawyers that are working on victims' issues. If they're in danger and they come to us and need support, we partner with them to help protect and defend them so that they're able to do their work in the field, knowing that they know they have the wisdom, they know what the consequences will be, and they know how best to do their work. So that's how we work. We have 75 volunteers in the field at any one time over the years. And over all of that time, we've never had anyone that has been killed, which has been quite amazing because of the fact of the dangerous situations that we work in, but much more the dangerous situations that human rights defenders that we're working with, they are at a much greater risk. And for us, they're our motivation, they're why we're there, and I think as well as the physical defense and being on the ground, it's even more important the emotional support and solidarity and feeling that all of us are out there together and they're not alone in their work. We have an international body, so we have groups in Europe and the US and Canada that help back up and support the groups with an international network of advocacy, support, recruiting volunteers, so that our deterrence and trying to deter violence on the ground, when someone gets in trouble, we have Congress, for instance, in the US, write a letter of support showing that we need to defend them at their own country needs to look at international law and make sure that they're not hurt and they're able to continue to do their work. So, as Jenny mentioned, we're really excited to work with LAWGEF and WOLA on this event. They're great partners for us. We're really excited to have our team from Mexico up here and 2 defenders that we're beginning to work with in the north of Mexico. So I will end with that, and I hope you enjoy the evening, learn a lot, and hopefully you'll work with all of us for support for the future. Thanks a lot.
I thought it was hot in Mexico, but I've never been under the +40 and +30 lights. Right. Just to quickly introduce, we're also launching this publication tonight. There's plenty of them over there. Please take a copy. This is a product, I work in PBI in Mexico. We've had an increase in the request for help from human rights defenders over the last few years because of the risks that they're facing. So last year we did an exploratory mission to 6 states in the country. We heard a lot about all the different issues that human rights defenders work on. One of the results of that mission is that we're going to open a new team this year in Chihuahua and Coahuila, which are the states which Sylvia and Alberto work in. And the other product of that exploratory mission is this publication, which has a geographical focus, but also looks at all the different issues, including migrant rights and abuses by the security forces, which we're going to hear about tonight. So I'm going to hand over to Alberto, so he tells you a bit about his work.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas noches a todos y a todas. Muchas gracias a PBI, muchas gracias a Latin American Working Group, muchas gracias a WOLA por esta posibilidad de estar compartiendo con ustedes en esta tarde.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for being here. I want to give thanks first to WOLA, LAWGEF, PBI for making this happen.
Y en mi caso, trabajo para un centro que atiende a personas centroamericanas en tránsito por México, todos y todas sin documentos migratorios.
In my case, I work for a migrant rights center that works with Central Americans who are in transit through Mexico and who do not have documents.
Y la mayoría de ellos y de ellas quieren llegar y su meta es llegar a Estados Unidos.
And for most of them, their goal is to get to the United States.
Creo que la mayoría conocemos los riesgos que la gente sin documentos vive en México.
So maybe some of you know the risks that undocumented people face in Mexico.
Y desgraciadamente muchos de ellos y de ellas mueren buscando una mejor forma de vida.
Unfortunately, a lot of them die in an attempt to look for a better way of life.
Sin embargo, en este momento me gustaría resaltar
However, at this time I want to highlight
cómo la sociedad organizada podemos rescatar y salvar vidas.
how organized civil society can actually rescue and save lives.
En México, 400,000 personas cruzan sin documentos en la frontera sur.
In Mexico, 400,000 people cross the southern border.
Sin embargo, las personas que se han dado cuenta de este sufrimiento se han organizado y se han abierto 57 centros de atención para migrantes.
And however, some people have begun to organize as a result of this situation and have opened 57 centers for migrants.
Algunos centros reciben de 1,500 personas al día, en el caso de los albergues en el sur del país.
Some centers receive up to 1,500 people. That's, for example, in the centers in the south of Mexico.
Y los que estamos en el norte recibimos menos, atendemos mínimo al día 120 personas.
And the ones in the north, we attend about, or at least 120 people a day.
En estos espacios las personas pueden alimentarse después de días que no han comido.
In these spaces, people can get food after maybe having spent several days without having eaten.
En estos centros la gente recibe atención médica de enfermedades graves.
In these centers, people receive medical attention, some of them with very serious illnesses.
Y lo más importante, las personas reciben gente que está dispuesta a apoyarlos en este sueño.
And most importantly, they meet with people who are able to support them in realizing their dream.
En el caso de Saltillo, que es una ciudad a 5 horas de la frontera con Estados
In the case of Saltillo, which is a city about 5 hours from the border with the United States,
existe una comunidad muy consciente de la situación
there is a community that is very much aware of the situation.
y son los sectores más empobrecidos los que han dado soporte a este centro y a este trabajo.
And it is the sectors that are most impoverished that have been able to support this work.
Son las personas más pobres que donan el equivalente a cerca de $500,000 al año dando alimentos.
It is the poorest people that donate the equivalent of $500,000 a year.
No son las clases ricas las que sostienen este trabajo, más bien son los sectores más empobrecidos en México.
It's not the rich or the upper class people that actually support this work, it's the poorest people that support it.
Y cuando hablo de apoyar en este sueño, no hablo desde el punto de vista romántico,
And when I talk about supporting this dream, it's not from the point of view of like a romantic point of view,
sino que hemos descubierto que las personas en Centroamérica se les ha prohibido el derecho a soñar.
but we have realized that for Central Americans, they've been prohibited of the right to dream.
Las personas tienen que sujetarse a lo que tiene que ser, que es un mundo sin posibilidades.
They have had to accept basically being in a world without possibilities for them.
Y las personas que trabajamos con los centroamericanos agradecemos la posibilidad que nos brindan ellos y ellas de asumir que el mundo puede ser diferente.
And for us, for those who work with Central Americans, we are offering the possibility that the world can be different.
Y en este esfuerzo estamos junto con ellos salvando muchas vidas.
And in this effort, we are together with them, saving a lot of lives.
Y es justamente este mensaje que me gustaría compartir con ustedes, que son personas solidarias en este tipo de situaciones.
And this is the message that I want to share with you, people like you who are who can be have solidarity with this kind of situation.
Que sin su apoyo los defensores no podríamos trabajar
And without your support, human rights defenders can't do their work.
y habría muchas más muertes de migrantes centroamericanos en México.
And there would be many more deaths of Central American migrants in Mexico.
En nombre de las personas migrantes quiero dar las gracias por su soporte y por su apoyo.
In the name of the Central American migrants, I want to give thanks for your support.
Y gracias por estar aquí, por escucharnos y por estar atentos siempre a lo que está pasando en el mundo.
And thank you for being here to listen to us and also being aware of what's happening in the world.
Bueno, mi nombre es Silvia Grijalva, de Ciudad Juárez, del Centro de Derechos Humanos Paso del Norte.
My name is Silvia Grijalva. I'm from Ciudad Juárez in the Paso del Norte Human Rights Center.
Quizá hemos escuchado mucho de la violencia y es real. En estos 5 años pasados fueron más de 10,000 personas asesinadas en la ciudad, sobre todo hombres, y hombres el rango fue entre 17 y 35 años.
Maybe you've heard of the violence in the city of Ciudad Juárez. This is real. In the last 5 years, there have been more than 10,000 people killed. Most of them have been men between 17 and 35 years old.
Desde entonces hicimos una evaluación en el centro y nos dedicamos únicamente a la atención a las víctimas y sobre todo en casos de tortura y desaparición forzada.
We've done an evaluation in the center and we are focusing our work mostly on forced disappearances and attending to victims.
Llevamos varios casos de tortura, entre ellos una detención de 5 jóvenes entre 21 y 27 años.
We are working on several cases of torture. One case is of 5 men who were tortured and their ages were between 21 and 27 years old.
Ellos fueron acusados de detonar un coche bomba en el centro de la ciudad.
They were accused of putting a car bomb in the center of the city.
Pero antes fueron torturados brutalmente hasta estar en el hospital.
And before that, they were brutally tortured and they had to be hospitalized.
No se les comprobó su participación y ya no son acusados por el coche bomba, sino por posesión de armas y posesión de drogas.
They couldn't confirm that they actually did this act, so they were actually accused of possession of arms and drugs.
Hasta la fecha están detenidos en cárceles de Tepic, Nayarit, que está al occidente, y en Veracruz, que están hacia el sur de la ciudad, lejísimos de Ciudad Juárez.
Now they're being detained in two centers in Tepic, Nayarit, which is in the western part of Mexico, and Veracruz, both of which are very far from Ciudad Juárez.
Este caso es paradigmático porque ya no los están acusando de eso y aún siguen detenidos.
This case is paradigmatic because they're not even being accused of what they were originally being accused of, and they're still detained.
Y a pesar de que la Comisión Nacional hizo una recomendación a la Secretaría de Seguridad Pública Federal, afirmando que habían sido torturados, siguen igualmente detenidos.
And so even though the National Human Rights Commission made a recommendation to the National Security Ministry confirming that they were tortured, they are still being detained.
Junto con este caso llevamos varios de Ciudad Juárez que la policía ha detenido a muchísimos jóvenes y después los acusan de tortura, los acusan de extorsión o de robo, de posesión de armas.
Together with this, we also have several cases in Ciudad Juárez in which the police detained young men and they accuse them of having arms, of possession of arms and drugs.
Y el objetivo de la tortura no es asesinarlo, sino destruir a la persona por dentro. Y eso causa de veras un rompimiento total, la persona nunca vuelve a ser igual.
And the goal of the torture is not to actually kill the person, but to actually destroy them in a way. And after being tortured, a person is never quite the same again.
El testimonio del hermano de uno de ellos dice que nunca va a poder olvidar a su hermano en la cárcel.
One of the testimonies of one of the brothers of one of the person who is detained has said that he is never going to forget when he saw his brother in the jail.
Él le dijo, ¿cómo estás? Y su hermano solamente se levantó la camiseta y lleno de moretones y de heridas de los toques eléctricos.
He said to his brother, "How are you?" And he just lifted up his shirt and he saw that he was full of bruises and marks from receiving electric shocks.
Y este es el caso igual parecidísimo de todas las bandas supuestamente de jóvenes torturados en Juárez y en todo el estado de Chihuahua.
And this is one of many similar cases for all of the young men that have been detained in Ciudad Juárez and in Chihuahua.
Y solamente pues para finalizar les digo que los casos de desaparición forzada es cuando la policía llega y detiene a una persona y jamás se vuelve a saber de ella.
And just to close, the cases of forced disappearances are when the police detain someone and then no one ever hears from them again.
Tenemos varios casos también de desaparición forzada donde las autoridades ni siquiera ni siquiera han colaborado pues para la denuncia de desaparición forzada. Le dicen personas ausentes o extraviadas y cierran la investigación. O sea, no hay investigación, hay mucha impunidad.
In the case of forced disappearances, the police doesn't even take the case as a forced disappearance case. Often it's just the person is absent or missing, and there's a lot of impunity.
Bueno, les agradezco porque se pasa el tiempo y muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sylvia, Alberto. So, I guess most people here tonight are probably aware of the sort of context that's going on in Mexico. We've heard a bit more detail from Alberto and Sylvia, but just to underline that there's some statistics that show that 90,000 people have died in Mexico in the last 6 years in the context of the supposed war on drugs. The government itself recently came out with a list of 27,000 disappeared people, and it's thought that the number's far greater than that. Impunity is at a level of about 98%, and Amnesty had a report last year that showed that torture is a widespread and usual practice in Mexico. Basically, in these sort of contexts of conflict and injustice and human rights violations is where PBI believes that if there's going to be a true change in society, that has to come from the people who are on the ground, from the activists, from the human rights defenders, from the people who are really seeing what's going on and who have the proposals for a lasting change. I imagine a lot of you here tonight are activists as well. It's something that in Mexico is an extremely dangerous thing to be. We've seen what the UN Office of the High Commissioner have documented in Mexico, which is that human rights defenders are at risk of death threats, of harassment, of being followed, of being attacked physically, and in some cases of being killed. Also, they're at risk of the criminal justice system being used against them. You see a number of activists who are put in prison without any charges or on cooked up charges, and then later released because there's no evidence. What Alberto and Sylvia haven't talked about is the fact that they've also been at risk because of the work that they're doing. In Alberto's case, himself and other people from the Migrant Rights Shelter have been threatened, they've been followed, they've been physically attacked. In the case of Sylvia and the Paso del Norte Center, they had their offices ransacked by the federal police in 2011, and this year one of their members has been subject to harassment and being followed and threatened by members of the police forces. To use some other recent examples of the kind of risks, in Chihuahua we've heard about the torture and forced disappearance. Many of you might know about feminicide as well. In the country, it's thought that 45 women are killed every day in Mexico. And in the state of Chihuahua, in just 2 years, 5 women human rights defenders were killed, and 12 had to leave the state for their own security. To use some examples of PBI's accompaniment, well, first we should not forget that this is the state's responsibility to protect human rights defenders. The Mexican government should be providing measures to protect activists. That's not happening at the moment. PBI accompanies some people in the hope of keeping them safe, but it's really a stopgap until the Mexican government takes its responsibility. To use some examples from PBI, we accompany a lady called Alba Cruz. She works in Oaxaca State. There's a big social conflict in Oaxaca in 2006-2007. Widespread human rights abuses by governmental forces. Alba has taken on some really sensitive cases to push for justice in the hope that the government can learn from those mistakes and change. Taking those cases on, she's been subject to death threats. She had the cables on her car cut in an attempt against her life. Her child was threatened and had to leave the state. She doesn't live with Alba anymore. And she's just a couple of weeks ago, when she started working on a new case of indigenous populations that haven't been consulted before a wind farm was being imposed on their land, her offices were ransacked during the night. To use one other example of a case that PBI accompanies, we accompany a lady called Valentina in the state of Guerrero. In 2002, Valentina and another indigenous woman called Inés Fernández were were actually raped by members of the Mexican army. They searched for justice first at the local level, then pushing it at a national level. They weren't provided with translation, they didn't speak Spanish at that point. They weren't provided with medical attention. They were actually advised to leave their case because the army were perpetrated and this would give more risk to them and to the authorities who might provide them with the help they ought to. So they went to the Inter-American system and they took their case to the Commission and then to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. They're pushing this case looking for justice because in the communities there, they're saying that these aren't just two cases, this is something that's happened to other people. Inez and Valentina wanted to prove what was going on down in their communities. They pushed the case, and what started to happen was they started to receive death threats. And Ortilia, who gave them translation, she received death threats. Inez's brother, who helped her get the legal support that she needed and help her with the case, was killed. And they actually, at that point, is when they started to look for more international accompaniment. We started to accompany them, and threats didn't stop. The direct attacks were intermittent. There was an attempt to kidnap Valentina's daughter, but they weren't successful. But Inez and Valentina, who felt their lives were at risk, kept pushing, luckily enough, stayed alive, took their case to the Inter-American Court, and the court found in their favour against the Mexican government. This is no small thing because part of that Inter-American sentence obliges the Mexican government to change its military justice system, which is where those cases are. So that attacks against civilians are tried by civilian courts. It gives reparation to the victims, and the government has had to come out and admit its guilt both in the rapes of Inez and Valentina and getting in the way of their route to justice. So that's an example of human rights defenders who are at risk, the kind of risk they're facing, where the international accompaniment can have some degree of success, but now they're really pushing for the implementation of those sentences, and we have to keep accompanying them, keep being aware, and keep showing the international support to make sure that they don't find themselves in a situation of risk again. We're going to watch a short video now, very short, about what PBI does on a more of a global level, because this is purely on Mexico, but the video covers a bit more the international side of things.
Authorities charged the 34-year-old owner, Bilal Namad, with playing a leading role.
courageous advocates, lawyers, community leaders, human rights defenders. They face terrible risks. 25 Colombian human rights lawyers are killed every year. Mexicans defending human rights are in danger. So are Nepalese.
I had spent 258 days in military custody. I was severely tortured. 24 hours my eyes were covered with blindfold, hands were tied on the back.
Peace Brigades International works on protection of human rights defenders in 5 different project countries: Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, Indonesia, and Nepal. PBI works by building a team of international volunteers.
There are 3 methods that we used to help human rights defenders who are at risk. Those 3 methods were informational accompaniment, political lobbying, and physical accompaniment. So informational accompaniment involved sending letters of alert. That will unleash a series of consequences, and there's less chance that those corrupt agents can get away with what they do. And the political lobbying essentially occurs to try and spur the international community to react to the cases that are working. Physical accompaniment happens when the human rights defender is actually physically at risk.
Peace Brigades is based on the principle of non-violence. So we embody that principle by being unarmed. So PBI, instead of bearing arms, we bear vests.
But those PBI badges are more than just a label. And potential aggressors, whoever they may be, know exactly what lies behind them. The word international means just what it says. The volunteers are backed up by support networks in 15 different countries. These maintain diplomatic contacts at the highest level, embassies, the UN, the US State Department, and European institutions to ensure a safety net.
Primera vez violaron 3 mujeres.
Soldiers raped 3 women. One of them was a little girl of 12 years old, and she was made pregnant.
Optilia denounced the rapes and was threatened herself. But with PBI protection, her lawyers were able to successfully bring the case to an international court.
There's a real difference, I find, between wearing a vest and walking around normally without a vest. You're clearly marking yourself out as an observer, as a member of the international community. So if you're alongside a human rights defender who might be going to a police station as part of their work, the police tend to take much more notice.
PBI volunteers are a symbol of international concern about human rights abusers who have little fear of justice.
Desde el 94 que nosotros hemos empezado el trabajo.
Since we began with the exhumations in 1994, there have always been threats against the families who want to exhume their relatives. It's very important to us to have the accompaniment to keep us safe.
These human rights defenders are the bravest of the brave. PBI supports them, and lawyers all over the world are right behind its wonderful work.
I have fresh memories when I got trouble and first time I've been to UN office, OSCHR office, requesting support. They suggested me, they recommended me to go to PBI office.
PBI provides a deterrence effect to open up the space for human rights defenders to work in.
PBI's job is to ensure that there are no attacks. No news is good news. It takes enormous courage and dedication and unwavering international support so that the truly brave defenders of human rights can do their work.
I hope in the future, not only for Jitman, many Jitmans who are in trouble, many people, human rights defenders, witnesses who are in trouble, they would get support from the PBI.
PBI demonstrates the world's solidarity with those who defend human rights. That can save their lives.
The only other final thing I would say is just remember that it is the Mexican government's responsibility to protect human rights defenders. There was a law passed last year for the protection of human rights defenders and journalists. Journalists are at really high levels of risk in Mexico too, but that law isn't being properly implemented. The letter which Jenny mentioned and the action that you can take by getting in touch with us at the end, that would put a number of things on the agenda for the relations between the US and Mexico, including human rights defender security, so that's really positive action that can be taken. In general, any letters that can be written to your representatives to show that you're concerned about what's happening is another positive action. And if you have more of an interest in helping our organisations, well, in terms of PBI, if you'd like to volunteer, the vast majority of the people with PBI are volunteers. Please do come and talk to either Catherine or myself. And also, well, for all three organisations to keep doing what we do, obviously we do need funds as well. It's particularly difficult at the moment in terms of the economic crisis, etc. So if anybody can help us to continue doing what we're doing through donations, please come and see us as well. Any of us, Maureen, Jenny, Catherine, or myself.
Thanks, Ben. I'm Maureen. I'm the coordinator for the Mexico program at the Washington House on Latin America. And we thought before we moved on to Cita Sandy, which I'm sure Betty wants to hear, we wanted to have a few minutes if anybody has any questions for either Ben or Roberto or Silvia about the work that they're doing. We heard a lot about both the situation of human rights in Ciudad Juárez in terms of torture, disappearances, Alberto's work, which I think he probably could go into a little more on the kidnappings of migrants in Mexico, which is like one of the big key areas of his work. There's about 20,000 migrants coming through Mexico in transit, mostly Central Americans that are kidnapped in Mexico every year. They do a lot to address not just the humanitarian part, but also the human rights of migrants. So questions about that as well. So we thought we'd open up to see if anybody has any questions, comments.
I can just speak loud. Okay, I'll ask in English first and then in Spanish. Have you seen a major change in the last 4 months since the new administration has come into power in Mexico? ¿Han visto un cambio en los últimos 4 meses en que lleva el nuevo sexenio de gobierno en materia de derechos humanos?
Well, just before I'm going to pass to Roberto and Silvia on their issues, but just in terms of human rights defenders, there's an organisation called CENCO, Centro de Comunicación Social. They're constantly documenting aggressions against human rights defenders and journalists, and they did a press release on the first 100 days of being in the new government. They've documented 37 aggressions against human rights defenders and 56 against journalists, including one murder, in the first 100 days, which suggests that things haven't changed. And in terms of the law that was passed last year for their protection, they've made the right noises. The Undersecretary for Human Rights has come out and explicitly said we're going to implement this and strengthen it. Penny Nieto hasn't mentioned it. It would be good if he did. But we know that in practice, the mechanism to protect them that law creates hasn't even got the staff that it needs to operate.
En el caso de personas migrantes indocumentadas en México,
In the case of undocumented migrants in Mexico,
existe un nuevo programa que empezó con esta administración.
there's a new program that began with this administration.
Se llama Programa de Contención. En este programa hay un cerco de todas las policías en el sur de México que arrestan migrantes y son deportados en menos de 24 horas.
And it's called a contention program. In this program, there's basically a fence of police in the south of Mexico to arrest and deport any migrants that come through.
Y en esta nueva administración también se sigue ejecutando una ley de migración que quita y elimina derechos a las personas centroamericanas sin documentos. Por ejemplo, dificulta el acceso a la justicia.
And in this, during this amendment, there's also a law that takes away rights from migrants and makes it difficult for them to have access to justice.
Y otro cambio significativo es que autoridades de alto nivel han aceptado públicamente que recibieron un país carente de institucionalidad.
And another change is that high-level authorities in the country have recognized that there is a lack of institutionality in the country.
Sí, y la última es que antes había mucha promoción en medios de comunicación sobre la violencia en México. La nueva estrategia es eliminar todo este tipo de comunicación e ir creando la idea repetida constantemente todos los días, mañana, tarde y noche. Está disminuyendo la violencia, está una tras otra vez, y entonces tú dices, está disminuyendo la violencia ha disminuido. Sin embargo, no es así, tristemente.
So another thing that has changed is that before that there was a lot of information in the media about the violence that was going on, and now there's an effort to change that, and constantly, every day, morning, noon, and night, there's information in the media that everything is well, there's peace, and so then you think, oh, well, there's peace in Mexico now, but there's not.
Sí, otra idea es que se tiende a no hablar ya de narcos, ni de violencia, ni de asesinatos en los medios, pero en los primeros 100 días de Felipe Calderón, de Enrique Peña Nieto, fue mucho más alto los asesinatos que el año pasado en la administración de Felipe Calderón.
So another thing is that while there's not as much tendency to talk about narcos or violence or murders or assassinations, the fact is that in the first 100 days of Peña Nieto's administration, there's been more deaths than in that of Felipe Calderón's.
Y por lo menos en Chihuahua han aumentado las agresiones y ataques a defensores de derechos humanos.
And in Chihuahua, the aggressions and attacks to human rights defenders have increased.
Hola, buenas tardes. Tengo una pregunta. Tengo entendido que el albergue donde trabajas, Alberto, está enfocado a migrantes centroamericanos. Sé que hay muchos migrantes africanos también, y quiero saber si ustedes están apoyando también a personas de otros países, y si no, cuál es el motivo, y obviamente qué redes están creando para apoyar a este tipo, a estas nacionalidades. Y por otro lado, también un poquito lanzando la pregunta anterior, quisiera saber si en el albergue existe alguna oficina o alguna área en la que se esté apoyando legalmente a los migrantes centroamericanos que ustedes apoyan, probablemente para seducir un poco las nuevas reformas en materia de asilo en México, y si se está iniciando algún proyecto para darles una opción a los migrantes que no logran llegar a los Estados Unidos. Gracias. Felicitaciones por el trabajo que hacen.
Okay, so the first question was about, she was saying that the Casa del Migrante works with Central American migrants, and there's a lot of African migrants that come through Mexico, and the question was whether or not the center also supports African migrants, and if not, why not? And the second question was about legal defense to migrants.
Bueno, la Casa del Migrante en Saltillo se funda porque los migrantes centroamericanos utilizan el tren de carga para cruzar todo el país. Y la Casa del Migrante de Saltillo está colocada en esta ruta, que es la ruta del ferrocarril.
So the migrant house, well, basically, first of all, the Central American migrants tend to use a train that goes through Mexico to travel north, and the migrant house is actually located on along the route of this train.
Entonces, esta ruta es usada en casi 99% por centroamericanos.
This route is used almost 99% by Central Americans
Y un 1% por mexicanos.
and about 1% by Mexicans.
No tenemos la posibilidad, por nuestra situación geográfica, de poder atender a personas de otro continente.
And because of our geographic situation, we don't have the ability to attend to people from other continents.
Sin embargo, hay organizaciones en la Ciudad de México, Sin Fronteras,
However, there are organizations in Mexico City, like Sin Fronteras,
que ellos y ellas sí están dedicados a la atención de personas del continente africano.
and they do dedicate their time to attending to people from Africa.
Y requiere otro contexto de apoyo en cuanto al idioma, cultura, costumbres, y afortunadamente hay esta organización que está especializada también en este tipo de migrantes.
Who they actually require another type of support due to culture, language, and so fortunately this organization is there and they can provide that support.
En la Casa del Migrante de Saltillo contamos con un área legal.
In the Casa del Migrante Saltillo we have a legal area.
Y en este momento nos enfocamos en marcar la inconstitucionalidad de algunos artículos del reglamento de la Ley de Migración.
And right now we're working on the migration law and some of the articles in the migration law that are actually unconstitutional.
Tenemos alrededor de 30 casos en el 2012.
We've been working, in 2012 we were working on about 30 cases.
Casos de personas migrantes que nos están ayudando a empujar este tipo de derechos, como garantizar el derecho al trabajo dentro de México y a la regulación migratoria, que en este momento la ley no permite.
And in those cases, we're working on being able to attend to those people to guarantee work and to regularize their status in Mexico, which the regulation of this migration law doesn't allow them to do right now.
Y eso es lo que estamos intentando hacer.
So that's what we're trying to do right now.
Why don't we take maybe 2 more questions so we also have time to hear some music? Okay. Jim. After.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi pregunta es la siguiente. Me perdí parte de la presentación porque un poco tarde, pero me gustaría saber, ahorita que mencionaste que tiene un área legal en la organización y que hablaste de la inconstitucionalidad de algunas disposiciones normativas, si han llevado o han promovido algún caso en instancia internacional, específicamente al sistema interamericano, y en todo caso, en caso de que sí, en qué parte del proceso va, porque es un sistema muy lento, pero sí ha habido algún resultado. Eso es todo.
Bueno, primeramente muchas gracias por estar aquí y por presentarnos la información muy importante. Mi pregunta es, usted mencionó, señor Alberto, que los sectores más pobres eran los que trabajaban más con los emigrantes centroamericanos y quería saber por qué se daba eso. Y también quería saber en general qué tipo de discriminación es lo que viven los migrantes centroamericanos en general, porque aquí no se escucha mucho eso, y también cuáles países de Centroamérica son los que más, con las personas que más trabajan ustedes.
So the first question was about the use of the inter-American system regarding the situation for migrants who are in transit, and the second question was about why is it that the poorer people who are providing help to the migrants, and what kind of discrimination migrants face in Mexico, as well as what countries they come from.
necesitamos un caso.
To take a case to the Inter-American Court, we actually need a case.
Y las personas migrantes en tránsito no son personas que permanezcan en el país.
And in the case of migrants who are in transit, they usually don't actually stay in the country.
En 10 años que tiene de vida la Casa del Migrante, no hemos encontrado un solo caso de una persona que desee empezar un proceso judicial a largo plazo en México.
So in the case of, for the Migrant House, which has been working for about 10 years, we haven't had one single case of a person who has wanted to stay in Mexico to actually do this case.
La justicia en México es extremadamente lenta, entonces ni siquiera en México se han logrado agotar las instancias.
Justice in Mexico is extremely slow, so even in Mexico, it would take a long time to actually go through all the legal processes.
Sin embargo, aprovechando que el sistema interamericano es amplio, lo que sí hemos hecho son audiencias temáticas.
So given that the Inter-American system is, has a lot of facets to it, we have also done thematic hearings in the Inter-American Commission.
Hemos tenido dos audiencias temáticas, una por secuestro de migrantes y otra por migrantes desaparecidos en México.
We've had two thematic hearings in the Commission, one on the kidnapping of migrants and one on the and disappearances.
Y también estamos trabajando con el sistema de Naciones Unidas, con el sistema ONU.
And we're also working with the United Nations.
Ahora, México es un país de migrantes también. Recordemos que aproximadamente son de 9 a 10 millones de mexicanos viviendo en Estados Unidos.
So Mexico is also a country of migrants. There are about 9 to 10 million Mexicans living in the U.S.
Y los sectores más empobrecidos tienen familiares en Estados Unidos.
And the poorest sectors of the population also usually have family in the U.S.
Y la gente puede ser solidaria cuando entiende la problemática.
And people can usually support this issue when they understand it a little bit more or closer to it.
Es esta razón que la misma gente expresa de por qué tienden la mano a las personas migrantes.
This is the reason why a lot of these people say that this is why they support the migrants.
Y el tipo de discriminación es desde la cotidiana.
Discrimination can take place every day.
Hasta por la ley.
Even by law.
Por ejemplo, en México las personas migrantes no son consideradas población vulnerable.
In Mexico, the migrant population isn't considered a vulnerable group.
Y este término marca la diferencia entre recibir atención médica o estar regularmente en México.
Whether they're legally defined as vulnerable or not, whether they have access to certain medical care, for example, and other services.
Y en México hace un par de años hubo una encuesta sobre discriminación y hubo 3 poblaciones mayormente discriminadas. La primera son extranjeros, después personas no pertenecientes a la religión católica y tercero, alguna persona con una orientación sexual diferente a la heterosexual. De estas 3 formas, de las 3 personas o grupos más discriminados, en su mayoría tenemos 2 en los migrantes, que son personas extranjeras y después personas que no pertenecen a la religión católica.
So a few years ago there was a survey in Mexico about the people who face the most discrimination in the country, and there were 3 groups that were identified. The first is foreigners, the second was people who have a different sexual orientation, and the third was people who don't belong to the Catholic religion. And so in terms of migrants, migrants actually belong to 2 of those groups, foreigners, and in some cases they don't belong to the Catholic religion.
Cierto. Y por México el mayor número de personas que cruzan son guatemaltecas. Sin embargo, los guatemaltecos y las guatemaltecas tienen redes de apoyo mucho más sólidas.
So in Mexico, the largest number of people that come through Mexico are Guatemalan. However, most of the Guatemalans also have a lot of networks of support.
La población que menos redes establecidas tienen es la población de Honduras.
The group that actually has the least amount of support networks is the people from Honduras.
Entonces, más del 90% de las personas que pasan por los albergues son hondureñas porque no tienen una red de apoyo establecida.
So more than 90% of the people that come through the shelters are actually Hondurans because they don't have a support network.
Y en estos espacios conviven hondureños, en su mayoría guatemaltecos y nicaragüenses.
And in the shelters, in these spaces, they're the Hondurans, Nicaraguans, and Salvadorians live together.
30 seconds. Only because I've seen quite a few people come in since the start. And also because I brought 50 kilos of these with me from Mexico. I'm not going back with more than one. Alberto's been giving me grief all week saying that I'm an agresor en contra de defensores de derechos humanos. But I'm basically attacking him because he reckons I've made him carry these around for days. So that's something for the UN to put on their national board. But as well as the issues that they talked about, there's other issues that are important to human rights in Mexico in this, like discrimination, gender discrimination, like economic social rights, like the exploitation of natural resources and the impact that's having on human rights. So please just do take a copy, there's plenty over there, and it covers far more regions than those that we've been able to talk about today as well. And finally to say, as well as saying thank you very, very much for coming, please do come and talk to us afterwards because we haven't had much time for questions and answers, but we're going to be here, so please do come and find us.
So, on behalf of the PBI Latin America Working Group and the Washington Council of Latin America, I want to thank you for coming, thank all of our speakers.